Welcome to Two-Way Tonight, live from Rockefeller Center. I'm outside right near the Christmas tree. It's right down there. Let's give you a shot of the Christmas tree, because why not? There it is, right? There's the Christmas tree right there. You recognize it from stage and screen. So funny story. I was supposed to do the show from a hotel lobby. I won't say which hotel I'm on, and they kicked me out about 10 minutes ago. And I had to try to get someplace to do the show. So why not come to the center of the world here, Rockefeller Plaza, to do the show from here, home of Saturday Night Live, 30 Rock, Top of the Rock. I think Fallon is from here, Morning Joe, the Today Show. There's lots going on in this plaza, and maybe we'll do a tour later. But for now, let's talk about the chaos occurring several hundred miles to the south, where since we last joined you on the morning meeting, Speaker Johnson's life went to crap. If you're here on Two-Way, please raise your hand. We'd love to get your questions in. Tim Hogan will be joining us. Is Tim already here? Hope he is. Tim Hogan will be joining us, former Capitol Hill chieftain and friend of
Yes,
Two-Way
Tim's here.
will join us. Bring Tim in now. I could use some help. But basically what happened was Speaker Johnson thought he had a plan to pass a bill to get this thing onto the floor and over to the Senate. And Elon Musk had different ideas. We saw this morning, Elon tweeted against it. We thought maybe that was just for theatrics. And instead, now, not only does Speaker Johnson have to figure out how to pass a budget to keep the government from shutting down with the help, I say that in air quotes, of Elon Musk and Vice President-elect J.D. Vance and Donald Trump, but then he's got to figure out if he's still going to be Speaker in a couple of weeks. Joining us, a man who knows more about Republican politics than almost anyone else on the screen right now, Tim Hogan. Tim, haven't seen you in so long.
Hello.
You're looking a little like Jimmy Fallon. Welcome. Before we talk about news of the day, catch everybody up. We haven't seen you in a while. You're a fan favorite here. What's been going on in the life of Tim Hogan from a couple weeks before the election till this day?
Yeah. Well, a lot of work. I should start by saying I saw your Christmas sweater episode and I felt really left out in the morning. So I'm wearing this today.
That's good work. Good work. Strong.
Yes. We're taking some time off. I think all Democrats are taking a little bit of a walk in the wilderness. I took that to Japan. So took a vacation there for a couple of weeks, met with Rahm Emanuel while I was there. Just kidding. That didn't happen.
Okay.
And have been slightly off the grid, but I'm happy to be back.
All right. Well, Tim, who did you work for in Capitol Hill? You worked for a lady named Tulsi Gabbard, but who else did you work for?
I worked for Congressman Stephen Horsford. I worked for Senator Amy Klobuchar, and yes, former representative and current DNI nominee Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah. So you're a creature of both sides of the Capitol. What's your view? And I see John Fedor's here, who will definitely have a view. So we'll bring him in too. What's your view before we look at some of the news of the day? What's your kind of 80,000-foot view of what Speaker Johnson faces now?
I think his job is really confusing. You've got Elon Musk. There is some begging going on for Donald Trump and his vice president to weigh in on where things stand, because you've got Elon Musk making his position apparent, and same with Vivek. And so the lines of authority are a little crossed. And I know you all have talked about this in the morning meeting. I don't know how long or sustainable that is. And it's not just on the budget. It's also, now you've got a little while ago, Senator Marsha Blackburn tweeting directly at Elon to do something to move the Kids Online Safety Act. So I think your wires of authority look like a mess right now.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and put up the tweet or the statement by J.D. Vance. Very odd statement in many ways. It's a statement Vance put out, but said it was attributable to both Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. Maybe Trump put it out too. I guess he did. Anyway.
Yeah.
All right. The most foolish and inept thing ever done by congressional Republicans was allowing our country to hit the debt ceiling in 2025. It was a mistake and is now something that must be addressed. Meanwhile, Congress is considering a spending bill that would give sweetheart provisions for government censors and for Liz Cheney. The bill would make it easier to hide the records of the corrupt January 6th committee, which accomplished nothing for the American people and hit security failures that happened that day. This bill would also give Congress a pay increase while many Americans are struggling this Christmas. Next. Increasing the debt ceiling is not great, but we'd rather do it on Biden's watch. That's saying the quiet part out loud. If Democrats won't cooperate on the debt ceiling now, what makes anyone think they would do it in June during our administration? June is approximately when the debt ceiling would have to be addressed, because the and barring authority of the Treasury Secretary to do that. Let's have this debate now, and we should pass a streamlined spending bill that doesn't give Chuck Schumer and the Democrats everything they want. Republicans want to support our farmers, pay for disaster relief, and set our country up for success in 2025. Only way to do that is with a temporary funding bill without Democrat giveaways combined with an increase in the debt ceiling. Anything else is a betrayal of our country. So this is very similar to what Elon said. You can take that down, put Tim back up, and let's bring in John Fedorowicz. So this is a very chaotic situation. Where it's headed, I don't think anybody could tell you. I talked to a bunch of Republicans in the last half hour while I was also setting up my anchor position here at 30 Rock. And everybody's got sort of a different point of view. Welcome in, John Fedorowicz. Again, what's an issue here is the no caucus, which in this case doesn't just include the Freedom Caucus, but the president-elect and Elon Musk. The no caucus doesn't really have a plan for passing a bill that could pass the Senate, and doesn't really have a plan for saving Speaker Johnson's speakership. They just don't like the status quo of the bill that was there. So this has been true. We saw it with Paul Ryan. We saw it with John Boehner. We saw it with Kevin McCarthy, and now we're seeing it again with the current temporary speaker, which is there's simply no way to survive and pass something if it's not unified control. So, John Fedorowicz, what's your view of how this ends? Do you have one?
I don't have a view of how it ends because there is no such thing as a congressional majority. So the situation is that Johnson acceded to the wishes of the Republican caucus in not designing a gigantic omnibus spending bill. So he just came up with an 84-day bill, and now they don't like the 84-day bill. And they may be right not to like the 84-day bill. We're hearing a lot of stuff about what's in the bill. Some of that may be true. Some of that seems maybe not to be true. There's a whole line about how apparently the bill allows the District of Columbia to build a new stadium on top of RFK Stadium, whereas other people are saying that the language in the bill says that they can't build a stadium on top of RFK Stadium. As with all spending bills and language in the bills, it's very recondite. It's really hard to follow. It's very big. People stuff stuff into it. It's very complicated. There is no congressional majority. Having a 2-seat or a 3-seat majority is the equivalent of not having a congressional majority, nor does the other party have a majority. So they are throwing something together a couple of days. Johnson had he basically said, I'm just trying to get us over the hump. Just help me get us over the hump. And Trump was making indications and noises like he wanted Johnson to have that freedom. And the revolt in the Republican caucus, particularly among the tougher people who don't want any spending and all of that, has clearly changed Trump's mind. But he is providing, as is the problem with the way he might be leading the party, absolutely no sense where this is supposed to go. The government will shut down. Is it Saturday night? Something like that. Like the U.S. government will shut down on the eve of Christmas. Like that really can't happen. I mean, maybe it will happen. Maybe it can happen.
Yeah.
This is not a good way for Trump to be beginning his presidency. The notion in that thing you read from Vance is somehow, let's try to blame this on Biden because he's still president for another 30 days. But nobody actually thinks that Biden is really president anymore. And so if Trump doesn't provide any roadmap for Johnson in this incredibly difficult position on how exactly it is he is supposed to go ahead, let the government stay open, he's going to be starting in a position where the American people are going to still think that the country is in bad shape, is in bad odor, and it's going to shift where he's going to start getting some of the blame for that. I don't think he is right now or today or tomorrow. But he can't just say no. Like he's not in a position anymore to just say no to things.
He isn't the president and he isn't the speaker. Tim, when you recommended I do the show from the Plaza at 30 Rock, did you know it was going to rain?
Yeah, I'm just trying to instill total
practical
chaos
joke
for you, Mark.
Practical joke. All right, so now I'm in an overhang. Amazed that my Wi-Fi continues to work. Tim, why is it that Republicans have lost every government shutdown? Why do Republicans always lose that fight? What's the what's like the basis for that, or is it all just idiosyncratic? They lose each one for different reasons.
I mean, maybe it's a little bit idiosyncratic, but I think it goes back to just a governing philosophy of there's not really a wing of the Democratic Party that believes we make people's lives better by shutting the government down. I think there is, like you said, a contingent in the House Freedom Caucus that is always going to be cantankerous, always is going to be annoyed anytime a CR comes up, anytime a spending bill comes up, and you have to manage that coalition as a Republican. So you have people who are willing to throw up their hands and say, well, the hell with it if this doesn't work. I don't think you really have that on the Democratic side. It's why, we have leverage in positions like this and why Speaker Johnson's going to need Democratic votes to get this done.
Yeah. So let's do a little Schoolhouse Rock here. It seems like what Elon Musk and his posse, including Donald Trump and JD Vance want, is for Republicans to pass a bill that is somehow stripped down, only contains stuff Republicans want, somehow find Republican votes to pass that, which I don't think is possible, send it to the Senate, and then Chuck Schumer will somehow decide he's going to pass a Republican bill. That's like 7 steps short of actually avoiding government shutdown. So, Tim, what do you think will happen now? Since that's not going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is 2 things. It is either Donald Trump is going to start his presidency with a government shutdown on Christmas and remind people of the chaos of his governing.
Let me just stop you there. Even though this program and others have suggested Trump is acting like president, it is still Joe Biden.
Oh, I agree, but this is also, and you have talked about this on programs here too. Is he has stepped in, like whether or not officially the transition has happened, it has not happened. But he is the one publicly negotiating this right now.
Right, but again, I'm not taking the blame off of Trump for the reasons you said, but shouldn't we expect Biden to step in and try to fix this too, or no?
I mean, I think so. Again, to my point that I think Democrats have an interest in keeping government working, yes, but I think the visibility that Donald Trump has brought upon himself at this point, in terms of where blame would go, it would go to Republicans. Also, because the reason that this is happening is because the machinery of the House is so screwed up. So I think that's it. It either there is a government shutdown and we don't get a solution, or there is some compromise and he's going to pass it with Democratic votes in the House. It'll be something that the Senate can pass. It gets through and it gets signed by Biden.
And John, before you jump back in, you jump back in, it's all right. Tim, do you think at this point Johnson will stay as Speaker?
It's a great question. I don't know. I would think so. I don't know that Trump wants to depose and have that fight at the beginning.
But Trump may not control enough votes to make him Speaker.
I think if he wanted to keep him as Speaker, he would be able to keep him as Speaker, and I think his interest would probably be in keeping him as
Speaker. That's a fair point. John.
It would be so insane for the Republicans and Trump to somehow arrange for Johnson not to be Speaker that I even given how crazy Republicans can be, I can't really believe that's going to happen. Mike Johnson is a very conservative Republican. The bill that they have thrown together to jury rig to get through the next 84 days is a bill that he has only put together, his people have put together in desperation. You're not going to get somebody to come in who will be in a stronger position. The position that the Republican Speaker is in is a position of somebody with a 2-seat majority. So the next Republican Speaker will have a 2-seat majority and will also be facing a democratically controlled Senate until maybe the 6th of January. I'm not quite sure when the Republican takeover of the Senate. It's not Inauguration Day. The Republican takeover of the Senate will happen.
It's the 3rd. It's the
3rd of January. Okay, so we basically have to get from like the 20th of December to the 3rd of January, at which point there could be a stripped down bill of some sort that Republicans could agree to in the Senate, and that the House could somehow get together so that all 219 Republicans who would be sitting there could vote on. But that's not going to happen until the beginning of January, and we do have this period of time. It
Right.
doesn't make
I want
sense to ditch Johnson.
No,
Johnson
it
is not the
doesn't. It
problem.
doesn't. But if 5 Republicans say they don't want Johnson to be speaker, then I don't know who's going to be speaker. Tim, we want to talk to you about the election, about Vice President Harris, et cetera. But we're going to stay with this topic. If you've got questions on this topic, please raise your hand. Here's the great news for this program. If we had to design like a Frankenstein guest to come on and talk, you'd want a former member of Congress who's got a PhD, right? That's who you'd want. That's who you'd want. Luckily, we have that person right here. Congressman Dan Lipinski, former Congressman, Illinois. Congressman, so happy to see you. Explain what's happening in the House and what's going to happen next in fewer than 10,000 words.
Typical.
And thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mark. I just came in from a run, so I wasn't
All
going to get
good.
on. But then we started talking about this. I couldn't resist. This is a typical Republican majority in the House over the last 15 years. I'm not sure how they can get through this. The only thing I can see happening is they put a real clean CR with nothing else in it, just extending government funding for 30 days, 60 days.
Not even disaster relief, just pure clean.
Yeah, unless they can come to some agreement. And again, it's going to have to be an agreement with the Democrats. There are Republicans who want this disaster relief. President Trump, to Trump, that's not pork, apparently, because he said he wants it in there. So if Republicans want to put disaster relief in there, they're going to have to give the Democrats something for the Democrats to go along, because they're never going to pass this just with Republican votes in the House. And I think this is I was on a couple of weeks ago, Mark, and I said there's too much optimism about the Republicans are going to be able to get done over the next 2 years, because they're going to have a hard time getting anything through the House. And I think President Trump's going to have to come in and save Speaker Johnson, get him the votes on January 3rd. I think right now he doesn't have the votes to be Speaker. But who else wants to step up and be Speaker right now? That's the question. And no one. They're going to pick someone else. Trump's going to pick someone else. I assume he will just step in and say it needs to be Johnson, but it's going to, with soon it's going to be a 1-vote majority in the House for the Republicans. And I don't see how they get anything done except a few things where Trump has to come in and say, okay, I want this. I need you to vote for this. And that's not going to be too much.
Do you think Senator Schumer could find the votes for a clean CR?
I think so. I think, as Tim said, Democrats generally want to keep the government open. There's some Democrats that are going to be gleeful about what's going on right now and seeing the Republicans already having problems. But I think in the end, there'd be enough. I think Democrats would come around and say, yeah, we don't want to shut the government down. And the Republicans are going to have just as much trouble when they have to come back, whenever the CR runs out. So let's all go home, and we'll see this play out again in however many days they write the CR for.
So let me ask all three the same question, then I'll bring some other folks in, starting with you, Congressman. If you were an advisor to Speaker Johnson, what would you tell him to do?
Go with a clean CR or a very, very stripped down CR that maybe has the disaster relief, whatever a couple things Republicans want. See what the Democrats are going to say that they want in exchange for that, and just get this over with.
Tim? You're muted. I don't know how that happened. Sorry. There you go, Tim.
Yeah, I generally agree. But I think the strategy is you are begging the president and maybe Elon Musk to get in line and help you develop a strategy to get this done. There's no rule that says Elon Musk can't be Speaker of the House, is what I'll say. So
yeah. Tim, what about trying to do the debt ceiling now? Is that something you think Schumer would go for?
I don't think so.
Yeah. I mean, it's weird that Trump wants to do it now. I mean, I thought the statement was actually brutally honest. They're basically like, we don't want to do this, so let's do it now while Biden's president. But could the Democrats really? I guess my question is, Tim, is it possible that if they pass a virtually clean CR with the debt ceiling increase, that Schumer would be blamed if he didn't support it? Is that possible?
Maybe, but I also think that's extremely difficult, and I don't know that the votes would be there to get that done. Also, look, that the debt ceiling is also a leverage point. So to be able to,
Yes.
lose all the levers of power in the House and Senate and then be okay with doing that, it seems possible.
Yeah. Good point. John, what would you tell the speaker to do?
I would tell the speaker that we're having this conversation about the CR and a clean CR, omnibus bill versus the Republican majority. Can you get to how many people out of the 330 million people in the United States have the foggiest idea what we are talking about?
Just the
5
two-way
million?
community, and a
Three-
couple others.
The two-way community. But I mean, literally, 2 million? Maybe 2 million? Nobody knows what's going on here. We know what's going on. We're interested. We know that Johnson has a political problem and Schumer has this, and there's a clean, and Elon Musk is saying this, and the bill is dirty, and there's some money for RFK, or there isn't money for RFK Stadium, and all of that. None of this is so opaque. This is so bizarrely opaque that the idea, if I were Johnson, I would say to Trump, I will do whatever you ask me to do.
Yeah.
You decide,
Space
you're the head of the Republican Party. You have the sway with the members. I don't have. You tell me what to do. Send a guy down here. Send these people you're putting on OMB. Send them down to sit in a room and write something that we will pass, that every Republican can vote for. And then you take it to the Senate, because I have no sway. And it's not that I have no sway because I'm a bad person or I'm a terrible speaker. This is just the dynamic of the moment, and we can't rely, if we get something that could get 25 Democratic votes, we're going to lose 30 Republican votes. So you got to do it. That would be my advice.
I'll tell you
be the man in the arena. You're the man in the arena. Go be the man in the arena.
Solve it.
And then you will.
I'll tell you something that I can't prove is true, but as I think about it now, I think it's true. If Musk and Trump and Vance had not come out against it, I still don't think it was going to pass. I think they got ahead of the parade and said, let's kill this thing, because it was going to die anyway. So I'm not sure what I'm not sure I'm right, and I'm not sure what the implications are, but I think
you're absolutely you are. I think you are unquestionably right. Trump wanted this to happen. He wanted something to happen so that this wasn't something that was going to be bothering him for the next whatever. And it just wasn't going to happen. So he's now, but if he's going to get ahead of the parade and take a role in killing it, Johnson has the right, simply in political terms, to say, okay, boss, give me marching orders. We'll do what we'll do what you say, so we can do our job.
Tim, I know you probably not have, unlike Vivek Ramaswamy, you probably haven't read all 1,500 pages, but what would be in a CR that would put maximum pressure on Schumer to sign it? So if it was clean, disaster relief, and debt ceiling, what else could you put in it where it would be hard for Schumer to say no and for the White House to oppose it? What else? What else?
A public option.
Funny.
I don't know.
I mean something.
Like, it's got to be pretty high.
No. I mean something Republicans would want. In other words, I don't think they can. It seems like they don't want to pass a bill that loses a lot of Republican votes. Maybe loses any. Right.
But I think that's the quagmire here. I don't think that there is anything. I don't know exactly what threading that needle looks like.
Right.
To John's point, I think it is just like, if people cannot, the Republicans cannot just default to their position of crankiness and view every line item that they don't like as something that is a poison pill for it, and that just relies on an attitude change, and the attitude change has to come from Trump. So to John's point, I think this is beyond the specifics. It is about
Right.
cajoling people to get it done.
Right.
I mean, look,
I'm gonna
to be
go
fair
ahead.
to Republicans, just to be quickly fair to Republicans, because it's like, oh, they're all crazy. Like, what is funding for the Francis Scott Key Bridge doing
I
in this
agree.
bill? Like, what the hell? Like, we're trying to keep
I'm
the
gonna give
government
you-
open
I'm gonna-
for
I'm gonna
3
give you-
months.
I'm going to give you a Schoolhouse Rock lessons that I learned in 1993. Congressman, were you in the House in 1993?
No.
No. All right. So in 1993, Bill Clinton wanted to pass the crime bill. I think it was 93. It might have been 94, but I think it was 93. And they kept putting more stuff in it because they were trying to get round up votes. And they'd say Congressman X wanted this thing, Congresswoman Y wanted this thing. So they kept putting stuff in. And they said, now it's too big to fail. And what my sources said in the Clinton domestic policy shop, too big to fail is sometimes too big to succeed. You can't assume that if you keep loading stuff into a bill by trying to buy off more and more people that it will pass, particularly in the current climate of the Republican Party. It's easy, like it was easy to attack in that bill, midnight basketball. There was money in the crime bill to fund after-hour basketball leagues, midnight basketball. The fact is, I don't know, midnight basketball. I wouldn't want the federal government spending money on any basketball, but if they're going to spend money on crap like that, there's nothing wrong with the concept of midnight basketball. There's a bunch of stuff in this bill that shouldn't be in the bill, and they couldn't buy everybody off. And particularly with the climate of, you've got a president-elect and you've got Elon Musk, who will just demagogue and attack stuff in the bill. They'll just demagogue stuff in it. They'll just be like, this is horrible. This whole bill should come down. Don't vote for it. When, Trump could easily support it in the next breath. All right, everybody stay here. Tim, we're going to talk to you about some other stuff because we're desperate to hear your point of view on the end of the Eras tour and the election and a bunch of stuff. But let's bring in Dan. Dan, tell folks where you are, what's on your mind, and please, Lord, may it be about this important topic of Speaker Johnson's dilemma.
It is.
Excellent.
Absolutely. I'm in Alabama, North Alabama, and
What
I was
tee
watching
are you on there, Dan?
it close to Huntsville. Close to
Okay.
Huntsville.
No, what tee? Aren't you on a golf course?
Oh no, that's my backyard.
Okay. Looked like a golf course to me. That's pretty nice.
Yeah,
What's
no,
on your
it's a
mind,
farm.
sir?
Yeah, so I paid very close attention to this today, and it was kind of interesting. Vivek, when he first posted that he had actually read the bill, which was something, kind of amazing coming from anybody in Washington, D.C., that somebody had actually read a bill. But, he posted out a summary of it. And so, I loaded it into Grok and asked for a quick summary of what it was. And there were things in there like $12.3 billion for Ukraine. And it wasn't just for the next 90 days. They extended the Global Engagement Center for a year. It was supposed to expire, but they went ahead and extended that for another year. Those guys are under lawsuits right now for the censorship that they did. So, I mean, there were things in that bill that were just poison pills, and people were not going to vote for it. And the outrage from the Twitter community was pretty swift. And what was interesting was a lot of senators started saying, we're not going to vote for this if it comes to us. I mean, so I thought it was just, ill-advised, especially after an election where people were clearly not wanting to do the same old thing. Now, you guys have mentioned a couple of times about how you get these bills through, and that, you got to buy votes from other people. Well, I think in the old days, that may have been the case because the only place you got your news or information about these things was off the TV, and they kind of, chose and pick and choose what they put on TV. But nowadays, you don't have to have, 100 million people watching Twitter. Everybody that's on Twitter that's looking has friends. They call them and tell them, or they engage in communication. So the word spreads quickly. And Trump and his team are very acutely aware of exactly what happens.
Dan,
Listen,
what would you
the
like to see?
situation-
Go ahead, John. Go ahead, John. Go ahead.
I'm going to say this. In an ordinary dynamic in Congress, in the House, what's happened in the last 3 years is totally without precedent in this sense, which is you'd have a House majority of 20 to 40. And in that situation, you could buy votes from some people with the understanding that you were giving other people a pass to vote against, because you had enough of a cushion that people who said, I can't support this, you say, okay, you vote against it. And what's more, yell at us. Yell at us. Go to your constituents and say this bill is a disgrace. We're not going to discipline you. We're not going to pull you from your committees or your subcommittees. We understand the situation you're in. Being in a situation in which the majority is 10 or less or 5 or less means that the people in power have no authority to say, you can't vote for this, because they don't know if they have enough votes at the time that the thing is happening. So this is an unprecedented political situation where people always had some room to maneuver. Johnson has no room to maneuver. So also, if you're going to be one of these people who wants to go and say, yeah, I stuck 12 billion in for Ukraine, you can do that too, because you sort of know the bill's not going to pass anyway. So it's a kind of paralysis that libertarians have sought for 200 years, where the political system itself is making the political system untenable as a matter of simple functioning. And that's why when Mark says, what would you do? Foggiest idea. How anyone...
Tim, go ahead.
No, just really quickly on that. I mean, like that rationale of trying to whip votes in that way and adding things and allowing people to defect. In the situation that Trump has created, there's no rational calculus that would make sense for anyone on the fence in that situation to say, okay, with this new proposal of a CR where I'm upset about some potential spending, let's also add a debt ceiling increase on top of it. Like, I just don't know how there is a rational growth of a Republican coalition in the House to help pass it. And at that point, it is idiosyncratic and just up to Trump to convince people to see it his way.
Well, maybe you guys can explain to me what the difference is. I mean, because as I understood it, the CR was just, we're going to take the spending we're doing now and we're just going to extend the existing spending.
Well, that's a clean CR, but they added a bunch of stuff in it, including the disaster relief.
Yeah, how's that different than an omnibus or a minibus or whatever?
Yeah, it's kind of a hybrid. It's functionally like an omnibus, and they thought the disaster relief. The speaker was on TV saying, "Well, it's for red areas, so it's okay."
And Thomas Massey said back in September, he was like, "You wait and see. Come Christmas break, they're going to bring something up that has additional spending in it." And Speaker Johnson back in September was going, "No, I'm not. We're not doing that. We're not going to have an omnibus. We're not going to have a minibus."
But then North Carolina was buried in oceans of water. So the situation that you're describing, again, is not a situation about how does the Republican Party maneuver under Trump with the omnibus, all this. It's the situation of having a 2-seat majority.
Yeah.
No one's ever been in this. When in our lifetimes has a party been as weak?
John, this is
okay, you know better than I.
It's everything that's passed in this Congress, in the House. Every major piece of legislation has been done as a suspension bill because, yes, you're right, because Republicans can't do it on their own. This idea that the majority is supposed to do everything on their own, I think that's a problem to begin with.
Yeah,
right.
It's terrible. Right, and this is a degeneration over 20 years of this idea that in order to create the right mood inside the Republican caucus, no bill would be brought to the floor that was not supported by at least a majority of the Republicans in the Republican.
No, right? It's not the
that was the Hasker rule. Now we have, unless it's a unanimous Republican vote, with 218 Republicans supporting it, the speaker should lose his job. Like, okay, that's crazy.
Dan Collier, thank you for joining, Jane Collier. Tim, let me ask you a question. Obviously, one implication of this, we all assume they'll have some solution. They're not going to shut the government down for the rest of December. one implication we've talked about is, can Johnson actually be speaker? But the other implication, which I think was referenced, which seems to be quite significant, is you can't think there'd be a lot of confidence that Speaker Johnson could pass the first reconciliation bill, because they haven't even talked about trying for Democratic votes. And
No.
and the notion that they can't keep this group together, because Elon's not going to like the reconciliation bill. He's not going to like everything about it. Dan Turrentine points out that Punch Bowl is saying that Trump trashed Speaker Johnson to senators today privately and said he screwed this up. So how would you think Republicans will regroup now? They can't possibly just keep their reconciliation strategy, or can they?
I think they will. I don't think it's going to be clean or easy or successful. I mean, they, laying out a broad strategy of reconciliation on the border or on taxes, that is a gnarly situation once you begin to unpack it and what's going to happen with SALT and what gets extended. And yeah, there's not a lot of confidence in Johnson right now. Like Dan just flagged, Trump saying he's mishandled the situation. He hasn't even started working with Donald Trump in his official capacity as president yet. But also, to John's point, there's no use in the exercise of deposing him and finding someone else to do it. I just think this is the reality of how the Republican House will govern or not govern for 2 years. And it is about margin. It's about a tiny margin, and it's not going to be easy. I don't know what passes. I mean, I feel like as Democrats, we frequently, when there was unified Republican control, it was like the Republican agenda was always easier because it was budget, pass things to reconciliation, tax cuts, and judges as a Senate approvals factory. And so they get to avoid some of the gnarlier parts of trying to build a coalition to pass legislation. But I don't know. I think that's going to go away. I don't have a good answer.
Yeah. All right. Yakov, welcome in. We've been experiencing up before today one of the most eventful presidential transitions in modern memory. It just got more interesting. What are your thoughts? Or your question?
So back in the good evening. So back in the day, when the majority party ruled, they passed bills, like they got 60 or 70% of what they wanted. They brought in the opposite party and they got stuff done. Why can't the Republicans get back to doing that and winning? And if they don't do that, Donald Trump will face a Congress, a Democratic-controlled Congress, in 2 years from now, and they'll make his life miserable.
I just got to say again. They have a 2-seat majority out of 435 votes. You try. Good luck.
Well, exactly. But John,
up.
exactly. Your point is like this, and this is not to like zoom out and just like anti-incumbent fervor or like party and opposition to the party in power. But like, yeah, good luck, right? Like this is for Democrats trying to make work what they tried to make work. Now Republicans on the receiving end. So like, Godspeed to you.
What's important here is that Trump won the presidency in this astonishing third run, right? And the Republicans got 53 seats in the Senate. But things did not go well for the Republicans in the House. They didn't lose the House. Things did not go well for the Republicans in the House. And there are 3 players in Washington when it comes to this. There's the House and the Senate and the White House. And Republicans will control the White House and control the Senate. And they have operational control of the House, technically, but this is not a majority. I don't know. My math is bad. They have a 0.3% majority in the House, right?
But Yakov is correct. How about we get back to regular order? How about we get back to committees producing legislation? And if the Republicans and Trump have a mandate of things that people really want, you can get a majority without having it to be only getting every single Republican to vote for you. You can get some Democrats. I mean, if it is what there's a mandate, then that will happen. There'll be pressure on Democrats to vote for things that are popular. So you can get things done if Republicans are willing to do it that way.
Yeah. Mr. Patel, hold on. Mr. Patel, how do you pronounce your first name?
Tushar.
Tushar, welcome in. Tell folks where you are, what's on your mind, please.
I'm in Oakland, California, and Been watching your program for a while. It's great. I love it.
Thank you for being part of it.
I have a simple question, which is, I don't understand why they can't just say, pass a bill that says we are going to continue spending at the current level until March or whatever, and nothing else. Like, how can anybody not vote for that? It
Yeah, so
doesn't.
we've talked about that. That would be a clean CR through some period of time, and they may have to do that. I think that's been floated as the most likely outcome. The problem is who's voting for that and who's not voting for that. For one thing, it doesn't have the disaster relief. For another thing, it doesn't have a bunch of stuff Democrats want. And the question is, if they did that, would Schumer definitely pass it? Tim, if it were pure clean, would Schumer have to pass it?
Unclear. I mean, I think Democrats are saying right now we had an agreement and that's what this bill is. And if you want to go another route, you find the votes. I mean, this is the dance we do every time on a shutdown, on a CR, the debt ceiling. Find the votes if that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
I think Congressman Lipinski has said something very important. He said, look, if you do things in the right way, the old-fashioned way, things that are popular will pass because Democratic congressmen want to vote for popular things and not vote against unpopular things. They also have to face voters in 2 years and all that, right? And that's what a mandate would be, meaning an ideological, general political mandate. The thing that Republicans are grappling with right now, and I say this as a conservative, Republicans do not have a governing mandate. That is what happened in the House. I think there are issues on which Republicans and conservatives probably have something close to a mandate, meaning like dealing with the border is probably reasonably close to an issue that you can say will transcend normal ideological boundaries for people who want to run for re-election in 2026. But when a party has a 2-seat majority in the House, that party does not have a political mandate as we would understand it in the United States. And Trump may have a personal mandate, but there is no mandate. And Republican voters and people who yell about this on Twitter and all of that are going to have to come to understand this emotionally because they're not going to get what they want. I'm not saying Democrats are going to get what they want. Paralysis is probably the most likely thing that could happen, in which case what we'll get is a series of clean CRs, each of which last for 15 days, and the entire political system will be run by a crisis every 2 weeks that will be solved by simply continuing the government at the present level for another 15 days. And then God knows what happens. Maybe, there's a flood, there's a hurricane, and then the news shifts so that something else has to happen. I don't really know.
I don't see how Schumer doesn't go along with a clean CR. I think he will. And
on what term? Like how many days would you say he has to go along with the clean CR?
I don't. It's hard to say.
I mean, because he only has 3 weeks left.
Yeah.
But look, Republicans should have wanted, and Trump should have wanted this to get passed because there's spending in here that is going to eventually get done. And why not do it now instead of later? I think that's one thing that doesn't make any sense to me. Why would Trump want this to die, clean stuff off the table and get it done with? And so it doesn't have to be done when Republicans have to take responsibility for all of it, like the debt ceiling. But there's also spending that Republicans want. There are things in this bill that Republicans want to get over with and get done now.
But
Lindsay,
four of them have to not want it. Only four of them have to not want it.
Yeah.
Out of
and four of them
220.
Four of them won't. Lindsay, welcome in. You didn't have your hand up, but I want to know what you think of Speaker Johnson at this point. Would you like to see him stay as speaker? You think he's a good speaker, strong speaker? What are your thoughts?
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I kind of was looking at my phone, I'll be honest. Speaker Johnson, I think I'm kind of squishy on him because I think he's kind of squishy. It's been interesting to see him kind of run around with Trump and the posse of Trump. I'll be honest, I don't know that I really want to see this pass, but I don't think I have a strong enough opinion to slam my fist down and ask for it. Like I didn't send anything to Lindsey Graham or Tim Scott this time. So I know that they would be on the other side of it, or if they have to be. Or I didn't send anything. Well, actually, my representative, Nancy, is not going to be voting for it, I guess. So as I say, I don't know that I have a strong enough opinion. So I'm kind of just taking in everyone else's opinion.
All right, thank you, Lindsay. Florio, can you unmute? What do you think? What do you think of Speaker Johnson, Florio? Or you think he's in a tough spot, not up for the job? What do you think? Florio, can you hear me? You're unmuted, but you're also doing something, I see. So, all right. Floria's not prepared to tell us what she thinks of Speaker Johnson. Tim Hogan. Oh, here comes Floria. Tim Hogan. Do you think Joe Biden will come under pressure to try to solve this? Government shutdown in his watch?
It's dicey. I think he could be brought in. There could be pressure brought on him, but I think at the point that we are where we are right now and the conversation shifts to pressure on Joe Biden, that feels like an evolution of the spot we are in right now that doesn't feel supernatural.
And what happens if we're in a government shutdown next week on the eve of Christmas, and all the stuff we always see happens when there's a shutdown? Who comes under pressure then?
I mean, I think it's the Republicans, and it is not just this specific situation. I think it's also historical. Most of the time when you see a government shutdown happen, Republicans bear the brunt of that blame.
Yeah. All right.
John
or
case,
Congressman
can I just ask you a question, Mark?
Yeah.
Mark, I wanted to ask you a question based on your experience, and also, doesn't this weird thing happen sometimes where suddenly Secretary Yellen will say, "Oh, look, we found an envelope
that's about the debt
in the
ceiling.
bottom drawer."
That's only about the debt ceiling. That's not about the ceiling.
That's only the debt ceiling.
Yeah, that's only the debt ceiling.
Oh, okay. All right. So,
all right.
So there is nothing that they can do other than pass a CR.
Well, or pass a budget, but they're not going to do that. Those are their only options, and they're not going to do that. All right.
Right.
I'm gonna talk to Tim about some other stuff. Appreciate John and Congressman Lipinski. Appreciate you coming here. If you're still here and news breaks in the next 10 minutes, we're going to bring you back. But grateful to you. Go ahead, Congressman.
If I can say one thing, the comment that I appreciated most on this whole show is Lindsay, who admitted she wasn't sure about something. Rather than everyone who claims that they know things, claims that they know things that are in the bill that apparently are not in the bill. Vivek claiming he's read the bill. Look, Vivek did not read the bill. If he did, he doesn't understand a lot of it, because no one does unless he's going to go and reference 1,000 other laws. So I appreciate Lindsay actually admitting that. So sometimes it's better when people do.
Yeah. Congressman, thank you. John, thank you. Appreciate you both joining. Complicated story. I'm sure we'll be talking about it tomorrow. I hope you'll come back. So, Tim, tell us what you think the reasons are. This is part of our D-Future series. What would you say are the 3 top reasons why Donald Trump won?
This conversation is always, how much time do I get and how much rope are you going to give me?
Take all the time and rope you want.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are some structural reasons. I know this is like the least satisfying because it feels the least reflective, but I think the conversation does have to start with the idea that we were in an environment where inflation was dominating a lot of the legislative agenda that the Biden administration was focused on. I think rightfully at the beginning focused on jobs and job creation coming out of a pandemic, and that voters just felt that, and this is true globally, that the administration was not doing enough on prices on that part of the economy. And when you have the right track, wrong track numbers he had, it's just very hard to win. Now, like, I think one interesting counterfactual from the election that if you could have run it, I would have been curious what happened, is if Vice President Harris launched her campaign and said, all right, it's day 2. Here are 10 things I'm going to do different than Joe Biden, in particular on the economy and on prices. That would have been interesting. That is obviously not what happened. Mark, I remember you and we had conversations in the morning meeting about okay, we're a week into this, we're 2 weeks into this, we feel like there's going to be a rollout of policy, 2 to 3 areas where she's going to show some daylight between herself and the president. And that kind of happened, but not really fully. And I think it was obviously just not enough, and there was a
Right.
hesitation there to do that.
Let me just stop.
Yeah.
Tim, let me just stop you there. I'm sorry. I just want to codify what you said because I'm listening closely. But are you saying one reason she lost or Trump won was the worldwide turn against incumbents who presided over inflation? That's one of the main 3 reasons. And are you saying a second reason is that she didn't distance herself enough from Joe Biden? Or that's not a second reason?
Yeah, no, I think that's maybe like a sub 1 reason, but if I don't get to 3, that'll be my second reason.
Yeah.
It is not show. I think, being able to say day 1 that there are, here are the things I would do differently, just because right track, wrong track, the hill was too steep.
Yeah. Okay.
I think there is also and like there were ghosts of 2019, right, that came back in 2024 that were problematic. Policy positions that were taken that we couldn't shake. And I think there is a good piece weeks ago now from Adam Gentleson in the New York Times that talks about how the Democratic coalition, we have a constellation of interest groups that sort of force our elected officials to take the most maximalist position on an issue. We've developed an infrastructure that says, hey, we've done some polling here on X, Y, and Z issue, on LGBTQ issues, on immigration, on, name whatever, on some economic position. It's the most popular, and you should be in line with that. And there is not a room for any from believing from that. I think
so. Is that the third reason?
Yeah, let me say that's my third reason. And I would say what I think is interesting from Trump's perspective is he faced a little bit of this too with the anti-abortion groups on the right, and basically he ignored them. There, with his understanding at the beginning that he had to at least appear to moderate on abortion, he basically told them to screw off, and they kind of fell in line. And I think our side is not as mechanically used to doing things like that. And I can go on, but I'll pause.
Okay. What's happened since the election that you find encouraging for the party finding a better path forward?
Yeah. I think there is an understanding that for the first time, which is shocking for us, that we are losing voters who make under $100,000, that when we talk about policy, that we should be talking about it in a more universalist way for all of the critique of the types of policies that Trump had. No tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime. I think it was easier, and I'm not saying that it was decisive, but it was easier for people to identify themselves in that constellation of policy in a world in which they cared about policy versus saying, okay, we're going to roll out a white paper that if you are trying to buy a new home, we're going to help you with a $25K down payment, even if that is popular, giving people pause to sort of think like, well, does that apply to me? Like, am I in that world of a voter who that is going to make an impact on, I think is also important. And I would just say that this is me going backwards just a little bit on like the interest groups and maximalist positions.
Yeah.
But it dovetails with how we talk about the economy. I think Democrats are sort of viewed as like hall monitors right now. Like we were guardians of the norms. We were going to protect democracy. We were going to guard institutions, which are all important things. We were going to, protect access to abortion, even though I think voters also sought out for them to vote for that and ballot measures across the country. Those are all important things. But we also do frequently come off as scolds if there are diversities of opinion in our coalition. And I think like a good example of this, you disagree. I disagree. I don't think he would be a good HHS secretary, is RFK. He's a pro-choice person, right? Who is now part of the Trump coalition, who is going to be nominated to run HHS. Does he affect policy there on abortion? Probably not. But he is still embraced. He's put forward as a nominee. So I think there's a reflection there of how voters actually think about issues, which is like a mishmash. It's not clean. Listen to any focus group, any undecided voter, anyone who's still trying to make up their mind. They're not clean ideological lines. And I think the mismatch between how we let our interest groups force us to take maximalist positions and where those undecided voters are and how we needed to win them and appeal to them is big. There are a bunch of other issues that like there's not time to go into, but like our media ecosystem, Mark, you've said before, I think you have a view of, and many others, maybe rightfully so, have a view of media bias, but we don't have a cavalry. You had this conversation the other day about like, who's the Charlie Kirk? Who is the media ecosystem? Like you can go on and comfortably have an interview that the candidate going on raises the profile of that interview in that media ecosystem. So, yeah.
And how does that, a lot about this, how does that get developed?
I mean, some of it is investment, right? Like it's a combination of like organic interest, right? Like, don't get me wrong, you cannot have stale, boring content. Purely political. Republicans are much better at finding those like mixed spaces, those politically adjacent spaces, those like pipelines into, conservative leaning. It's like UFC or particular podcasts like Joe Rogan's. But it is also financial backing. Like the right is much more coordinated, at least like beginning to set up that media infrastructure to watch them develop a business and grow.
Yeah. If the vice president asked you this question, how would you answer it? Tim, what did I do during the 107 days I was the nominee that gives you confidence that I could win a general election in the future?
I think it is, if I am answering that question, that for all the talk of like devastating, huge loss, it was a 1.5 or less percentage points loss, that the campaign that was run in the battlegrounds, despite, very worrying shifts in blue states, was significantly less, which tells me that the campaign, while broadly we saw shifts to the right, in the targeted areas where there was a lot of spending, worked to a degree. It didn't work enough. But it works.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but we're short on time. Not asking about what the campaign did. What did she do as a candidate that should give her confidence that if she chose to run for president again, she was a good political athlete?
Yeah. I would say the front loading of all of the imperatives of how you have to run a campaign, 18 to 20, picking a vice president, preparing for a debate, rolling out a new policy, reforming your staff. It's hard. It's like understated how difficult and hard that is. I'm answering your question not to say things were perfect, but there is a certain level of like political animality that is required to be able to do that.
Yeah. Okay. Of the announced or discussed, mentioned potential DNC chairs, do you have a favorite?
We had this conversation about the VP, and I said I was biased. I'm biased again. I like Ken Martin from Minnesota. Ken or Ben, honestly, are my two.
Yeah.
And I think that refocus on the middle of the country, that refocus on state parties, is really important.
Yeah. Who would you tout as potential, not necessarily presidential candidates, but besides the party chair, where are you looking for leadership? Either a category like governors or senators, or are there particular people who you think the party will rely on as foils, critiquers of Donald Trump in 2025?
Yeah. Could be governors. I think could be senators. I think people like Andy Beshear or Wes Moore or Pete Buttigieg or Governor Pritzker. We're like walking in the wilderness for a little bit here. So I know that's like the question at the top of everybody's mind. But that is just going to sort itself over time.
Yeah. We make news whenever we talk about Rahm. So weigh in on Rahm. Is Rahm definitely not, or maybe a good presidential candidate for your party in 28?
I mean, I would just be surprised if he ran. Like, is there serious? Because I know his name was like also bandied about as potential DNC chair.
Why would you be surprised if he ran?
He's someone who knows how to win.
Why would you be surprised if he ran for president?
Well, I think historically it would be a big leap from ambassador of Japan to presidential candidate. Doesn't mean can't happen.
Walter Mondale practically did it in reverse.
All right, fair. But look, is his name in the mix? Sure. I guess my question would be, what is the perch by which he is, maneuvering in this era of, Trump 2.0? I think that's going to be a lot of, judgment on how governors are reacting, how senators are reacting, who's making their moments.
I just want to clarify something. Maybe I misunderstood you. Are you saying that your party should be more open to having pro-choice, pro-life, or pro-choice, pro-life Democrats play a role in the party?
I'm saying that there should be an openness to diversity of views in the party, and maybe that is a possibility. I think it was said on one morning meeting here that is interesting about RFK, and maybe I'm sourcing this correctly, the morning meeting, is that RFK is someone where you can find one thing about him that basically everybody likes. And I think that is a really good litmus test for like how you coalition build. Just because you don't agree on one issue, and it can be, you know, what we're talking about, abortion or climate change or energy policy or whatever, that can't be disqualifying because no one can pass all the litmus tests. The no winning coalition can pass all the litmus tests.
Yeah. We're over time. I want to be respectful and of your time and others. And I'm hoping you'll come back because I have more questions for you about the future. Tim Hogan, thank you. Thanks to John and the congressman and for folks who ask questions. Very grateful to you. Sorry about my camera movements, but man, this is a rough one for me. For those who asked which hotel it was, I'm not going to say because I'm hoping to get a free room or a cocktail. Thank you all for joining. We'll see you on the morning meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern time, and I'll be back here tomorrow night, 6 o'clock from a stationary position, I hope. Have a good evening, and see you at 9 a.m. Tim, thanks again.
Thanks.